What we're talking about here is something we've been working on for many months now. I've personally spoken to about 20 organisations across acute, community, all care settings now, to really start to understand some of the problems we need to address. And essentially it sits around people. And as you heard Steve say, 70% of the cost is people. So how do we deal with some of the issues in there? Quick question first. Hands up anybody who thinks they've had community nurses or mental health nurses or going out to see patients that aren't there because they've either been admitted to hospital or they've died, they've moved. Anybody? Yeah, most of you actually are nodding your head. Okay, I'll cover off some of that in this presentation. Okay, Alan?
Great, thanks. It was actually billed as you and I, so I'm going to be asking you some questions as we go through this. First off, just a little bit about the size and scale of access. I do not show this slide to show you how successful we've been over the years. I show this because of what actually underpins the data within this. But there are some absolutely huge numbers in here. And that's enabled us to learn an awful lot about what happens in each of these areas. So you go into classic healthcare, 20 million patients treated through you. That's how many people you have all treated inside a year. Social prescribing, huge number of prescriptions. I think that's over 1 million now. Just the pure number of clinical notes that are done through the various progress notes, et cetera, in Rio. But underpinning that is a set of databases that we understand how things work within your system. And that's really insightful if you're going to build a reimagined solution. And Lee's got some really wonderful diagrams. If you ever want one, please ask him for one. Hopefully it's not too much work, Lee, but never mind. But actually it's like a mind map of your usage. And it can really shine a light on some areas to provide some opportunity for using the system in the way that could shave some of that productivity time off that you were just talking about. And by the way, terrific talk, Steve. Thank you. On the local government side, social care in particular, both commissioning and provisioning, over 750,000 young people supported in their education. We have an education system that allows you to when your children want to go to a particular school in a particular demographic, chances are it's pretty much one of our systems. So we've got access to academic records there within that area. And are there correlations now between some of these data points, social care and educational attainment, as an example, particularly trending? So let's start thinking a bit wider in our data usage rather than just silos. And then into care. And this for me is one of the most underutilized areas because it sits for me between social care and healthcare. And nearly a quarter of all care in the UK goes through our systems, either for rostering, logistics, getting the right person to the right place at the right time to do the right thing with the right person with the right equipment, et cetera, the 5 rights. But also point of care. And actually the hackathon that Dave's team knocked up over a couple of pizzas and about 8 beers, by the way. Didn't tell you about the beers, did he? That's why it was so good. Really shone a light on the fact that we can use the system that we use for point of care in domiciliary care, in care homes, in nursing homes, but we can use the same software with a few changes and a few beers and pizzas apparently, and we can now apply it into clinical care and do complex care with that same app with some changes to it. So we're now leveraging parts, so that's our productivity, that's your productivity, and it's applying some innovation like OpenAI and ChatGPT to actually create insight. And one of the biggest problems we have across all of these areas, there are some real common themes like handover notes, shift handover. And unless you talk to the person that's actually done the care for the previous session, or they've missed something which you need to pick up, this was really highlighted in the hackathon, you can miss things. It creates clinical issues. So having the ability to capture all of that and hand it over, and even hand it over to the next person as if English was not their first language. So you could really be quite prescriptive about supporting the next person that's coming onto shift. Now, without you having to go through all of the notes and summarize it and realize that you may have forgotten something and so on and so forth. So computers, if you program them correctly, it's difficult for them to forget things. And that's especially true of the new versions of OpenAI. So thank you to Microsoft for the trillions of investment in that. So may as well take advantage. I said that we're working with the largest company in the world. Thought I'd mention it. So again, I don't tell you this to show that we've done well in this sector, but the databases that sit particularly underneath care are really, really insightful for us, particularly if you're going to start to remove friction from the system. So as an example, in the point of care app, in the rostering app, we know the languages that those carers speak. By the way, there's over 400,000 of them in this system. So we know the languages they speak. I mean real languages, not Python, Java, Fortran. Well, those Dave speaks 25 languages, by the way, Fortran, Python. We also know the qualifications they have. We also know where they are. We know the capacity of a care home at any point in time, nursing home at any one time. We know what a domiciliary company, what they have real time as well. So we know what their capacity is. So imagine if you could now, if you're building a virtual ward system, which is full of blocked beds. If you're going to release that, how about you can get access? Think of an analogy like Airbnb, where you put in your criteria because you want to go somewhere. Same with a patient, you want them to go somewhere, and you want it to match your criteria. Criteria, in this case, being a discharge certificate. So if you can match those things together, you're now digitally doing something which typically takes hours and weeks and potentially months in some cases to actually move people from a point of care in a physical location to a point of care in a community location. The difference in cost is over £1,000 per day, releases capacity, releases the nurse time, the administrator's time, and that's exactly what we're doing with Nelft. So thank you, Amish. So it's about the database that's set underneath that. Friction's caused by lack of communication, amongst other things. And you have to pull information. Where do I go to find something? Nothing's given to you. Nothing's notified to you. It's very difficult to get that level. So our design thinking around integrated care is about this push rather than pull. And again, rather than the teams being polarized and thinking about this is my task in healthcare, turn that 90 degrees and you follow the patient backwards and forwards across the care continuum. And that is where it gets quite exciting. You can link social care to healthcare to care in the community, all with a single picture, a single view. I was having some wonderful discussions with John over lunch about creating a simple summary of, say, 200 words, which is your life story. Actually, hands up in the room, how many have you had to repeat your story during a care process? I mean, everyone has to do it. It's terrible. So again, just a neat summary that sits on top. So when you're transferring care from point A to point B, you could be in an ambulance. There's a care record. Okay, I've got your history here, but summarized in a way that you can intuitively understand. Again, you can write that in the way that doesn't necessarily need to be English as a first language. It can be in any language for that matter. There's real-time translation available, very, very high standard, including clinical terminology available within OpenAI and the partnerships with the largest company in the world that we're working with. It never gets old. So again, just a few things that we've had and that we've picked up. These are just a few sentences, but these will resonate with you. Everyone has gone through this. We've all had family, friends, colleagues, people that we've cared for that have existed, that have had this. And Steve's point earlier about the how many of you have had carers turn up to where someone's actually not there. I mean, that's friction. It's causing friction in the system because information, communication not being shared.
Yeah, I think we must be the only industry still which operates entirely on a pull system environment where the systems and data we've all talked about is only as good as people know they need to go in and look at something in there. And of course, they don't know they need to go and look in. They go and look when they think the next case review is or the next time to look at that patient is. And we have had dozens and dozens and dozens of use cases, even within the four walls of an acute hospital. Right? I had an anaesthetist on only a couple of weeks ago, and she said, look, I have a problem. People need to have pre-op procedures done before we can do the surgical procedure. When they miss a pre-op, I'm not notified that they've missed a pre-op. I see it on the day of the procedure and realise they've not had it, so they're not going to be into theatre. We've lost the theatre slot. So if we were notified before they've missed something, we can look at it and make some decisions then, which could be to delay it and use that slot for somebody else. That's just one example, but some of those examples Alan listed up before, they come back time and time again. We have a safeguarding issue with vulnerable people. You know, when a child at risk ends up in hospital with a broken wrist or suspect injuries, the CPIS system tells the consultant that they're a child protection case, and they record more information, again, more data. It pushes it off into the summary care record, but nobody notifies the social worker that they need to look at it. They don't look at it again until the next case review. And unfortunately, in some cases, like going back to about 2002, I think, Victoria Climby case, sometimes the gap between those two events means something fatal happens to an individual. We still haven't addressed that in the system. But there is wastage through people not being integrated rather than systems on a mammoth scale. I haven't spoken to one organisation yet that hasn't said, we've got problems with this. We have wastage in people going to appointments for people that aren't there, people not coming in for theatres because they've not had things done, safeguarding issues, vulnerable people, often being, you know, we admit somebody to hospital, nothing is telling them that that person is also the registered carer for the other person in the household. We need to do something about that now. So I could go on forever about the use cases, but we'll press on with the presentation.
Well, you've covered my next two slides, so thank you very much. So again, you've got your builds on. Perfect, thank you. I'll just quickly go through this. Okay. Backwards one, it should be there, right, good. So when circumstances change, how do you then accommodate all of that? Can people process systems? Think about, and our systems are now being created to actually accommodate this thinking. Working out who needs to be informed, and Lee's work across the whole continuity of mapping out those personas and those jobs to be done impacts on these three elements, and that's what we're mapping. Then if we can move this forward, how do you solve these problems? Well, this is what we're announcing, Telecare Platform for the Future. And it works both with and without Rio Reimagined. It'll just be another feeder into it. So current Rio will work with this, and future Rio will be part of this. It'll literally be the same physical environment linked together through the largest company in all systems. And again, this is where we think the care and the integration needs to be turned 90 degrees and not just think about healthcare, not just think about care, not just think about social care. Turn it 90 degrees and actually try and create something truly integrated with a summary of your history, with a graphic which determines, I mentioned this earlier, the theograph, but it's basically a timeline which allows you to have a commonality of understanding across that whole patient's journey, responsive to whether it's 2 weeks, 1 day, 3 years, 5 years. And again, having that picture where you can now offer a holistic care record rather than just a health record or a social care record. And it's not just a summary care record, which I'll come into, it needs to be interactive. We're also not endorsing that it's an access-only policy. We're very much against that. You cannot do healthcare unless you switch and swap information safely, cleanly between multiple organisations, multiple systems, multiple people. So we're very keen on interoperability. We have a huge success in that. We do millions and millions of transactions every day within the Rio platform and our other systems. So we know it very well. That'll be on an Azure Fire platform going forward, which is really exciting. And that will give us the scalability, which you heard Steve talk about earlier. How do you scale this? How do you make it, out of the box, you make it scalable? Just putting it on cloud doesn't do it. It helps, but you need to take advantage of the platform capabilities really that fit underneath it. So the idea then is to create one view of a patient that you can sit above or within Rio, Mosaic, and all the other platforms that we have. So we are, regardless, putting all of our patient-centric platforms together and fitting into a common data platform. Why are we doing that? Well, it means that we can now turn our care 90 degrees. So you can actually see what happened in a care home. You can actually see what the drugs adherence was from the carer that's gone round. You can actually see what's happened in a virtual ward setting where you've got a longitudinal of their News 2 scores. And you can start to make interpretations against that far easier than you would be if you don't have access to the information, or you've got to go hunting for it. You've got to make a phone call. You've got to wait for somebody to update something. So another concept behind this is real-time update. Second, something's available. It's available in the core systems and visible within IntelliCare, which allows you to see what's happened left and right. So when you're making a clinical determination, when you're deciding on administrative care, you've actually got a better view of what the decision you would make, the prognosis, the next step of the care. And by making that referral, by making that next step of your recommendation of care or receiving it, it gets notified to you. It's like a task list that will appear. What have I got to do next? What's the next thing I've got to do? And if you go through that list, you can check them off. It could be as simple as swiping. Marketing, please forgive me. Think of Tinder for healthcare. Swipe left, swipe right. I'm just to be pulled off now. Who knows who's going to turn up at your door when you do that. But the idea would be to, again, not have a summary care record, but have a holistic care record, which allows you to actually make adjustments, to make interactions, to make decisions, and then action them from that place. So historically, a summary care record is purely just a read-only version of that. And again, data goes into it, but it's one way. Well, how about you make it a two-way street, and the things that you make decisions on can go back into the source systems. So you don't even need to be in Rio if you're within this. They talk to each other. So you can actually make a referral that goes back into Rio, updates the health system, and people are notified. And that's the thinking that we're going through. So what does it look like? Well, it's pretty horrible, isn't it? But this is just a screenshot of some of the styles that we're working on with both Cognizant and Microsoft. And again, this is based on some of the global work that they've done, but we'll obviously be sharing this out with you to refine the views. The idea is this will be modular as well, and based on you being able to move parts of this screen around. So it'll be widgets. So underneath it, we were talking about this earlier today, I think, one of the tables, Oxley's, thank you, is that you'll have your own view and your own preferences for how you want to see the data. But the underlying database is exactly the same. So it doesn't matter where that widget sits. If you want to concentrate on the RX, on the drugs, you can do. If you want to concentrate on the summary, you can do. If you want to concentrate on, it doesn't matter. But each one of those areas will be movable. So that'll be your personalized view, even though the underlying data is the same.
And I think the key element in this for me is this side of the screen is likely to be what we call your collaboration hub, which is where you'll define the key actions by different users or different groups of users that you might want to take. So if you're in ED, for instance, one of the actions you might do is to say suspend all services. Straight away, our system will notify anybody else that's delivering that care to those individuals, GPs, dom care workers, community nurses. It will notify them that person has been admitted to hospital. So you need to stop services right now. Equally, if you're discharging, we can have one that says commence all services. The system knows which people it needs to notify to commence services. Could be just to send a message, and what this will surface is the key contact network of people associated with that care, and you can issue messaging out then to those people. This is the sort of push notification world that just doesn't exist at the moment. So that's going to be a key area where we define everything that we want to do. And you as a user will be able to decide and configure how you want your notifications coming in. So you'll have to define different types of messages. It could be information notifications, alerts, or high priority alerts. And then you can say, well, I want an email, or I want an SMS, or I want to use a mobile app to receive that notification. So this will all be totally configurable by the users for the way they need to work and the jobs they need to do.
Even if you take something as simple on the face of it as book an appointment, it's actually quite a complex thing, really, particularly if you need to have someone in a particular room with a particular piece of equipment. It's a big simultaneous equation. Because this is built on, it's been built on Azure tech, Microsoft tech, it can actually interrogate your own calendar and look for free spaces. So if you're doing things like virtual ward consultations, you need to know who's available. It can actually go off and do a search and offer back, say, the top three options based on your own personal calendar and the calendar availability of the service providers. So that's a pretty cool thing, just even in its own right, to reduce friction. So by design, we're also looking at how you can make this crossing the digital divide. So we're very conscious of the type of users can be limited in digital use. That came up earlier in the conversation today, and not as digitally educated as we would hope. And I think, by the way, just my own personal view is that needs to be adopted as a strong educational component within the NHS as part of the training. But that's my personal view. But access to technology, it doesn't need to be a phone. I'm personally quite passionate about the unpaid carers that sit in the UK. There's over 5 million now, according to the latest surveys. 5 million people engaged in care that are not part of the traditional network. Well, how can you make that easier for them? How can we provide an app that helps them logistically manage that particular person that they're interested in? How can we engage them through consent, obviously, and ensure that their lives are easier, that someone's going to be, when an appointment is, and they can match their time, and they know how long it's going to take them to get somewhere if they've got to take them somewhere. And that list goes on and on and on and on. Integration to third sector. That was one of the conversations I was having over lunch. How do you really engage, not social prescribing per se, although that's incredibly important, but also the third sector in a wider capacity. Breaching socioeconomic barriers. So by design, multi-channel communication. The only one, Steve, I think you didn't mention was WhatsApp, but we can do that. Even TikTok, if you so want. Apparently my children tell me it's quite popular. You know the apps I'm on, clearly. With devices. So again, we're working on not just News 2 scores from traditional blood pressure cuffs and so on and so forth, but also the use of a mobile phone, your own mobile phone, or a carer embedded in our own carers products that enables you to take a News 2 score using a video. And that can be on a 5-6-year-old phone. And these things are reality, they're not Star Trek anymore, they're really happening. I mean, the apps now are so clever, you can cough into them and it will tell you if you've got COVID. So there's an STI one as well, but I won't talk to you about that one. Intuitive UX, you heard David and Lee both really talk about how can we engage you in the user experience of all of this. It's not something that we have a monopoly over, all that we certainly have done, for goodness sake, 24 years, and you've got Rio. So let's not make it form-based. Let's make it a bit more creative and leveraging some of the really advanced techniques that Cognizant and Microsoft have been producing around the world. Again, as part of a digital evolution that we should be taking advantage of. And that's why we're putting the investment in. Do more at home. And I won't go through this because we can share the slides. But the whole point behind this is reducing friction in the care system. Not just healthcare, not care in the community, not just social care, but all of it. And you can do that by linking it all together, turning the care 90 degrees. So, We can use tech to get people more engaged. People, probably the most important word in that, even though we've made it bold everywhere else. But I think engaging people in this, engaging you as the carers, engaging with you as the decision makers of the software usage, and us being able to support that. But we need your opinion, we need your input to really get that user experience correct, because we've got a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do this right. So let's engage together. Integration's the key, reducing friction, digital inclusion by design. Some of the systems we'll be designing, or some of the integrations will not be with a mobile phone. They'll actually be using any phone, so that we can use interactive voice response to actually respond to questions that you can do through an automation. So it's not just all digital, it can actually be good old analog as well. So again, not thinking purely mobile phone, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally, the person does need to be at the center. And I know that's a classic line that probably every tech provider comes up with, but we truly think that it's our customers that are the people we should be thinking about, because that's who you care about, that's who you need to care for. So that's just a quick romp through. I think that's it. Yeah, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Here all week.